All right. Hello, race fans and hot rodders. This is Jim McHugh, and this is the Big Comedy Podcast. And I am really excited for our guest today. We have a great guest and someone I've always admired and always heard just the best things about. When I worked in Chicago and I talked to comedians, and the word is out on the streets that you're a really funny, talented, great guy. And you have had like the career of 100 people. So I can't wait to get started. Like, it's almost the problem is, where do you get started? And so I thought I would start by, first of all, introducing Tom Dreesen. My problem is I kind of expect you to know him already, but it is Tom Dreesen. And one of the first things that I was aware of in your career was that you were in a biracial comedy team. And how did that get started, and how did that go, and were there roadblocks, or did it help you stand out in a crowded field? Or
Well, yeah, I got into show business purely by accident. I never ever thought, never dreamed that I'd ever be in show business. It was the furthest thing from my mind. I mean, my whole childhood, I grew up raggedy poor in the south side of Chicago, a suburb called Harvey, Illinois. And we had 8 brothers and sisters. We lived in a shack. We had no bathtub and no shower, no hot water. It wasn't during the Depression. I'm not that old, but I'm old, but I'm not that old. But anyhow, so ragged poor. I shined shoes in taverns. I set pins in bowling alleys. I caddied in the summertime. I sold newspapers on the corner, all to help feed my brothers and sisters. And none of this do I regret. I give motivation talks all around the country to corporate America as well as to comedians. But one of the things when I describe my childhood, as I just described to you, and I say that, and I do not regret one moment of that. I say that's the greatest thing that ever happened to me, growing up that poor, because it gave me the character and the courage later on to fight in life when there were a lot of struggles thrown my way. Nonetheless, I'm saying, but I did one thing I love to do. Of all the bars I shined shoes in, of course, Frank Sinatra was on every jukebox, and that's how I became
still
into
is.
him. And we'll get to that later, I'm sure. Yeah. The painting behind me, by the way, was done by a painter named Marcelo Nera from Buenos Aires. And he was a big Sinatra fan. And every night when Frank, and I'm going to get back to your original question, but
It's all good.
every night when I was working with Sinatra, every night when I would finish my show, I would exit stage right and Frank would enter stage right. We would crisscross and the band would still be vamping. The people would be applauding me off and cheering him on. When he got to center stage, he would say, "Tommy Dreesen, come back and take another bow. There's my man. There's my number one guy." And I would take what they call a half bow. I'd come halfway, I'd bow and wave at him and wave at the audience. And that picture behind me, somebody took a picture of that one time of me coming back on stage. And Marcelo Nera painted this painting from that and sent it, which I have hanging in my living room, So
Beautiful.
that explains all that, the painting behind me. But Frank would be on all the jukeboxes, and that's how I was 8 years old when I first heard Frank Sinatra on all the jukeboxes and bars. But the last bar I went to, when my mother was a bartender, my uncle owned a tavern. His name was Frank Polizzi, and he told jokes behind the bar. And I was fascinated by that this guy, with his vocabulary, with his vernacular, and with his timing, that all of a sudden this sound would come out of everybody's body in the bar and fill the room like electricity and unite all these people. All of a sudden they were all one in unison. And that was a fascinating thing to me as a little boy. So I used to tell a lot of his jokes, many that should not be told on a Catholic school playground, but I still never thought about children's. And as a kid growing up, I like to make people laugh, and I always thought of funny things, and I love to tell a funny story. But I went in the Navy. I was a high school dropout because we were so raggedy poor. When you go to high school, you want to look as good as the other kids, and a lot of peer pressure then. And of course, I had holes in my shoes. But anyhow, I go in the Navy at age 17, and 4 years in the Navy. I served in a Marine Corps Unit 2 for 9 months called NEGDF, Naval Emergency Ground Defense Force. Still was the guy who would tell a joke once in a while, but never thought about being so much. Come out of the service, I get married. I get one kid, then I got another kid. I got 3 kids. I'm working construction. I'm wheeling concrete. I'm pouring sidewalks in basements. Then I quit that job, and I was always a bartender. In the wintertime in Chicago, construction, you got very little work. So I was always at a side job as a bartender, and I told jokes behind the bar, And I was good at writing funny stories about the guys in the neighborhood and the men and women in the neighborhood. Everybody knew everybody in the bars. The bar was like a social club, you know. And so I could say, well, you know what Jim McHugh did the other day? Well, he came in here and they all knew you. So I could, you know, anyhow, so I was good at creating stories that weren't true, but were funny stories. And anyhow, that's still never think about being a comedian. Now I became a teamster. I'm loading trucks. I got my teamster card months later and became management. Now I'm a manager of all these. I'm a foreman of all these teamster guys. I would help my brother in the photography business. I was a private detective for a while. You know, husband and wife dating, a lot of stakeouts and stuff like that. I just did all kinds of jobs. So life insurance. But I joined a civic group called the JCs, that in those days, the Junior Chamber of Commerce. And they taught, you know, leadership training programs by attacking the problems of your community. You know, if there was a problem in your community, we'd form a committee, subcommittees, and we'd attack that problem and rectify that problem if we could. But in doing so, they taught you leadership training programs. They taught you how to speak in front of an audience. They had a program called Speak Up and all these things. But handling the problems of the community. And one of the biggest problems in those days, as it is today, were our young kids taking drugs, using drugs. So I had a concept, I had an idea. I wrote a drug education program teaching elementary school children, 8th graders, the ills of drug abuse with humor, with comedy. I would make the kids laugh, show some videos and play some music, but getting the kids laughing. Now, I'm going to digress for a moment. At that time, Jimmy, I was honestly praying, saying, God, what is it I'm supposed to be doing in life? This can't be it. Every job I went to, I wasn't fulfilled. I'd do well, but I didn't feel good about it. Sometimes I'd be in the bar with my buddies at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm looking around this bar and everybody drinking. I'm thinking, I don't belong here, but I didn't know where I belong.
Right.
So I was honestly praying, literally praying to God, saying, God, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? But this drug education program comes along, and I had a white guy helping me. John DeBoer was going to help me with the project. And the night that I was proposing this drug education program to the JCs, wanting them to sanction it as a JC project, a young black guy had joined the chapter that night and came up to me and he said, I just graduated from Norfolk State College in Norfolk, Virginia. E.I. DuPont recruited me here in Chicago to be a marketing rep. And it's my first meeting here. I want to join the Harvey, Illinois JCs. And he said, I'd like to help you with that project. I said, gee, thank you, but I've already got a guy. I had a white friend named John DeBoer. As fate would have it, and prayers are answered, the next day, John DeBoer called me and said, Tom, I can't do that project with you. I got a new job. And I thought, oh, gee, what's that black guy's name? Oh, yeah, Tim Reed. So Tim and I get together, we rehearse the project, so forth and so on. We go into the classroom, and the day we went in the classroom, I knew what a blessing this was, because the children were black and white. They were integrated schools, and they took to us right away, a young black guy, a young white guy, and we're poking fun at one another and making each other laugh and having the kids laughing as well. And then played some music and all that. And then we start planting the seeds of the ills of drug abuse. The program became #1 in 50 states and in 22 foreign countries through JC publications for JCs on how to teach drug education at an elementary school level. In those days, they weren't teaching drug education at a college or a high school level, let alone at an elementary school level. And I knew we had to get to them early, you know.
Right.
Anyhow, one day, a little 8th grade girl walking out of the classroom said, you guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team. And the thought of a black-white comedy team intrigued us. No one had ever done that before. So we start talking about it. Now, there were no comedy clubs in those days. We start saying, you want to do it? Well, I'll do it if you'll do it. Well, how do we start writing what we thought was material, what might be funny, you know. And we did this for like 4 months, and we'd always go over to his house. And his wife finally said, she's a sweetheart of a lady, his first wife. She said, Tom, you can't come over here anymore. I said, why? She's, because every 5 minutes you're coming in the kitchen saying, Rita, is this funny? Rita, is that funny? Rita. She said, you have to go do this somewhere. You're driving me crazy. So there were no comedy clubs. So we found an old jazz club, and we asked the owner, could we come on after the jazz group gets off? And the guy said, yeah, it's kind of you're a comedy team, are you? Yeah. Okay, well, you know, come here tomorrow night. Now we went there the next night, scared to death, petrified. You know how it's like when you first time you're going to do this. Now we're in the kitchen. They didn't have a dressing room in there. We're in the kitchen. They're pouring slop and dumping garbage, and we're back there gagging. And we got to go on. And now the guy, he come backstage. He came in backstage. He came in the kitchen. He said, "What do I call you guys?" And we said, Dreesen and Reed. He said, I said, Reed and Reed. He said, Dreesen and Rude. I said, I just say Tim and Tom. Just say Tim and Tom. He said, okay. Now he introduces us, and all we wanted to do was remember our lines. So we hit that stage, and we went 100 miles an hour. Hi, we're the comedy team of Tim Tom. He's Tim, I'm Tommy, Tom. We just drove it up here, and that's what we go. And we just went 100 miles an hour. And we did about 8 minutes, and we rushed off the stage, and we got the owner in a corner. How did we do? How did we do? He said, I don't know how you did. You never gave me a chance to laugh. He said, do me a favor. Come tomorrow and slow down. And the next night was a Friday night. We went there, and we got laughs. And something that I had written got a laugh right from the start. And in that moment, Jim, as you know, you've probably gone through, when that line that I wrote got a big laugh, it was like one of those B movies where the dark clouds open up and the sun bursts through. My whole being went, oh, yes, this is what I want to do. I want to be a stand-up comedian. Oh, God, now I know what I want, you know. And anyhow, we finished the night. I could not sleep that whole night. It was a Friday night. I went back to my apartment. I had a wife and 3 kids. I couldn't sleep all night long. I knew what I wanted. I got up early in the morning. The Saturday morning, I went down to the church where I used to be an altar boy, where I sang in the choir when I was a little boy, and where my mom sang in the choir when she was a little girl. And I got on my knees. It was a Saturday morning. There was no one in church. There was no service. And I prayed. I said, God, I now know what I want. I want to be a stand-up comedian. The thought that you might make a living making people laugh overwhelmed me. It overwhelmed. I couldn't believe that maybe this was what I was put here on this planet to do, because I felt that feeling that I never felt before. And I prayed. I said, God, I promise I'll do charity work. I'm making all these promises.
Sure.
That was September 1969. 50 years later, September 2019, I went back to that church. And on a Sunday in September, I gave a sermon on the power of prayer. And I told the congregation, right there, that spot there, I kneeled down and I said, God, I know what I want. I want to be a comedian. And all my prayers have been answered. You know, and I talked, my whole sermon was about the power of prayer. I'm not going to bore you with that, but
no, I'm not bored at all. I think it's fascinating.
Well, basically what I said to him, I said, when I went up to the lectern, I said, how many of you out there were ever thinking about someone that you hadn't seen in a long time, and the phone rang and it's that person? Or how many of you out there were thinking about someone you haven't seen in a long time, and you walk around a corner and you run right into them and you're saying, I was just thinking about you. And they said, you know, you won't believe this. I was thinking about you too. I said, has that ever happened? And the whole congregation raised their hand. I said, if human beings can transfer thought, and obviously we can, you've all just admitted it happened to you. If we can transfer thought, how much can we transfer thought to a supreme being?
Right.
You know, if we can do that, if we have the power. So I said, that's what prayer is. You know, God answered my prayers. I'm here to tell you. And by the way, it didn't come easy. That's what my book is still, because I was down a lot. So anyhow, that's a long answer to a very short question.
But you know what? I connected with so much of what you were saying. We just had a show last week. We had a new comedian come in, and he says, I have 40 minutes of material. I said, okay, well, let's just see 5 to 7. He gets on and he gets off in 3. He rushed so fast you could hear his mouth dry out.
Yeah.
And I said, this is fine, and you're going to come back, and we're going to do this again. But you're right now. You seem like you're shattered, and you did fine. You just rushed. I go, every instinct in your body tells you, if I can just get to that next punchline, I'll be safe. And it's lying to you. You just need to relax and slow down as a small group, and you have to be conversational, you know? And it was just so funny because you just said that. And then, like, when I first started doing comedy, a lot of what you just said, you know, I grew up in Connecticut, so there was no comedy scene there except for people coming through, you know? And so I got to do a little bit of comedy, and suddenly I was like, now what do I do with this? And I had done every job. I did concrete work. I did bartending, you know, like you say, you're making money, but you're not alive in some way, you know?
Yeah.
And the power of prayer. I think you're very much dead on, you know?
Well, I truly believe, you know, I don't get on a soapbox, but when I was a little boy, both my parents were alcoholic at one time. And my dad was a nice guy, but alcohol was his God. He loved beer. He was a beer drinker. You know, my mother used to always say, your father likes his beer. I said, he likes his beer, your beer, and the neighbor's beer. but he was a good guy, but he was a docile guy. But he never hit me or anything like that. But he spent time in the bars, And so when I was in first grade, the nuns, I went to Catholic school. The nuns taught us that we had a Father in heaven. And I was 6 years old, and I thought, really? I got a Father in heaven? He said, and he sent his son down here to tell us about him. And this is the prayer, the Lord's Prayer, and our Father who art in heaven. So as a little boy, when I had problems, I'd always pray to this Father in heaven that I believe would watch over me and take care. And I'm still that same little boy, because there isn't a night that goes by that before I go to bed, I get on my knees and I thank the Father in heaven for answering all my prayers. And again, it didn't come easy. You get. But I want to go back to the young kid that you talked about. Whenever somebody asks me to go see a new comedian, if I go there, and you know how it is on those open mic nights, that first of all, there's no one in the audience.
That's right. That's right.
They all came to do their set. They aren't going to laugh heartily at yours because it makes it harder for them. So it's really a torture. But I watch the kid and the boy or girl, and if they don't do well, they'll come up to me and say, "What do you think?" I'll say, "Oh, I'm going to come and see you next week." And if they bomb, but they come back next week, I say, "You're going to be all right. You're going to be all right, because that's what we do. Yeah. We train in bombing, So then I can give you some advice. And a lot of it, basically what you said, I tell them, if you never forget, I give classes, by the way, to comedians. And I give motivation talks to comedians called The Joy of Stand-Up Comedy and How to Get There. And I talk on 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. And I elaborate on those 4 points. But when I'm talking to young comedians about comedy, I tell them, I write on the blackboard, if you never remember anything I say, remember this: conversation, not presentation. Is it your act? You damn right it's your act. It's your job to make it look like it's not an act.
That's right.
It's a conversation, not a presentation. It's like your wife says to you, "Jim, I've got dinner. We got 20 people out there in the living room. I'm not going to have dinner ready for 20, 25 minutes. Do me a favor, go out there and tell them some of those funny stories you talk about your childhood." So when you walk out there into that living room, dinner's going to be ready in a few minutes. But I got to tell you something. I'm over at Juke Food Store today. It's a conversation. And I tell young comedians, when you walk out on stage every night, this is our house, not their house. I said, we always, whenever you're new, you think you're invading somebody else's territory. That already makes you uneasy,
right?
Because you're in their house. It's our house. If they could do what we do, they'd be up here. They can't do what we do. That's why they're out there. So this is our house. And when I walked out at Caesar's Palace, first time opening for Sammy Davis Jr., that's exactly the frame of mind. This is my house. It's intimidating when you work in those big houses and stuff, and but you're thinking that you're invading their territory. You better be good. No, you're in my house, and I got some funny stories to tell you about when I was growing up, and not about when I flew in an airplane, yet whatever it is. But it's always a conversation, not a presentation. When you're writing a joke, comedy is 2 things. Number 1, it's 9/10 surprise. The audience laughs because they didn't think you were going to say that. So the setup line has to hide the punchline. And the other rule is there are no victimless jokes. Who's the victim? You, me, the airlines, the government, this arena, the lighting director, whatever it is.
Yes, right.
So again, if we keep it conversational, we surprise them. Anyhow, that's the end of that lecture.
No, I love it. I want to get onto all this other stuff, but I'm fascinated by what you're saying. And I actually, I cheated. I watched some of your YouTube videos, and one of them I liked was you're talking about hecklers, and I found a lot of what you're saying to be so dead on. Like just letting somebody talk so that everyone, first of all, someone calls you a jerk, make sure you say, "I'm a jerk." So now everybody knows he called you a jerk, and you don't just respond to.
Well, here's how you do that. As I always say, if you're in a room with 85 people, and it's a small room, and some guy hollers out, "You're a jerk," everybody heard that.
That's right.
So you can off the top of your head go right back to him. Everybody heard that. But if you're in a room of 2,000 people,
right,
1,500 people, the guy's heckling you down front. The people in the back didn't hear that.
In the balcony.
So, in the balcony, they didn't hear that. So if you're going to go to him, if you're going to allow him to get in your act, it's okay. You better be prepared. But everything he says or she says, repeat back through the microphone for 2 reasons. Number 1, it gives everybody a chance to hear what they said. So if you have a response to that, now they know that's funny. If they didn't hear what he said, you could blurt out the most funny line in the world, but they didn't hear what he said.
Right. You got to make sure they get the setup, which was the heckle line.
Exactly. And
Right.
and the other thing is, it gives you a little time to think too.
Yeah. Right.
So what I always did, if you have, like I say, and there's nights in a big arena, if I got a guy down front, you think I'm going to ditch it? If I'm killing, I'm knocking him
Right.
dead. You think I'm going to ditch my show for this idiot who wants to just get a little fame for a moment? Hell
Right.
no.
Right.
But if it's a fun night and I'm scoring, and first of all, I want to qualify him. He might not be a bad guy. He might be a
Right.
good person who's having fun. And he sometimes when you're on stage and it's going good, a guy might say, "We love you. I
Right.
love you." And you might
Right.
think he said, "Get the hell out of here," or whatever. It may sound something else to you. So you first qualify. And again, you repeat it. And then again, your retort is better. So now the other thing too, if he's a mean guy and a bad guy, you establish that by repeating everything he says to you. You think, "Oh, I'm a jerk. I should get another job." You don't like what. Now the crowd is on your side.
Right.
Now when you nail him, they're going to applaud you. If you
Right.
nail him right away, they don't know who he is yet. So there's a lot of reasons.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then I'll close with this. One of my great heckler stories is one night I was working at the Riviera Hotel in Las Vegas, and I was working with Tony Orlando and Don. I remember that, and I was just knocking them dead. I was killing. It was a great room, but I think it was like 1,800 people in the room, but I'm knocking them dead. But there's a guy down front, and I'm Italian. We call him Gabons. There was this Gabon down front, and he's got all the, he's got the beads and the chains around his neck. And he's got two girls sitting next to him, one on each side, and the girls are laughing. And every time I get stage right near him, he would say, "You like this guy? I can't believe you like this guy. This guy sucks." And I look at him, and I go back to center stage, and the girls are going, "Oh, Tony, stop it," and they're laughing, and I'm going to here, and I'm working stage left, and every time I got near this guy, "Can't believe you like this guy. This guy sucks," and he's right down front, right? I look at him, and the girls go, "No, Tony," anyhow. So now I'm not going to ditch my show because I'm on a roll here for
Yeah.
this year, But I finished my show, and I see you've been a marvelous audience. Thank you very much, and blah blah blah. Now, and people are applauding, and I would go to stage left, and I would bow. I'd go to center stage, and I'd bow because I exit stage right. My last bow would be stage right. So when I got right over his table, the people applauding. I waved. I waved at the audience. I looked down at the girls, and I said, "You like this guy? This guy sucks." And I said, "Good night, everybody," and I walked up. But I got him in the end. But again, you don't want to. You got to learn how to not ditch your show.
Right.
You're going to go there. You better be prepared.
Yeah.
But
You
I
already
gotta-
got material that's working. You don't need him to help you.
Exactly. But I got to tell you one other thing. Today, it's a whole world. When I started out, Jimmy, there were hecklers everywhere.
Yeah.
I worked at Chitlin Circuit, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs. I worked all white clubs in the north and the south where there were guys came in to heckle, Italian
Yeah.
guys
Oh,
came
yeah.
in the neighborhood and all that. But today, when I see these comedy rooms, the announcement is, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. We have a 2-drink minimum. There'll be no pictures taken in the show. By the way, there'll be no heckling the performers because it's not fair to the other people. And if you heckle our comedians, the doorman is going to come and remove you." I went, "Holy cow!" Because when I started out, that was part of the game.
Yeah. It's on you. You're getting paid to handle it.
And yeah, you better handle that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think now I think it's funny coming out of this pandemic and doing shows. I'm finding that a lot of people now they kind of especially if you get anywhere near politics or anything. It used to be like Carson could go right and then he could go left and everybody's kind of happy. They knew he's going to be fair, but you don't get that kind of license anymore. If you go right or left, you live there for the rest of your life.
Well,
and also they're going to yell out, "I disagree." Like you're just doing a setup with, like you say, it's just trust me enough to get through the setup. It's going to be a surprise. I'm not going the way I'm building tension now. I need 12 words to get to the punchline. Can you spare me that? But I think because of the internet, people feel like their opinion is.
Yeah. Well, you're gonna have to learn to live with that. The stand-up comedians are the last bastion of freedom of speech.
I agree.
Last bastion of freedom of speech. When you take that away, you're taking America away. When people can tell you what you have to say, their next thing is to tell you what you have to think.
Right.
Don't let them go there. I cannot stand politically correct police. I cannot stand them. They're out to destroy comedy. They're out to destroy and tell you what you can say. Thousands of men and women died so that we have the First Amendment. We have a right to say whatever we want to say, not fire in a crowded theater.
Right.
We have a right to say whatever you want. You don't have to listen to us. You can turn us off. You can walk out the door. You can ask for your money back, but you can't tell us we can't say that. Now, if as offensive as it may be, there's things I wouldn't say just out of just being trying to be a moral human being.
Right.
But I would never ever tell another comedian what they can say and what they can't say. I'll never tell another human being, let alone a comedian.
Right.
That's what men and women died for, the First Amendment. That's why we're the country that we are.
Right.
And there's a big, strong movement out in this country to put that to rest. That they can tell us now what we can say, and we got to fight that back. And especially stand-up comedians. You know, Jerry Seinfeld and Chris Rock said they won't do colleges anymore.
Right.
You know, whenever somebody tells me about what do you think about the politically correct police, I say, first of all, who are they? We don't know who the hell they are. They don't have. Do they have a land?
Right.
Do they have a state? Do they have an office? Do they have
Right.
a committee? You know, but we keep apologizing to people. We don't know who the hell they are.
Right.
I always say, I want you to go tell my hero, Dave Chappelle. I want to be there when you do this, though. I want to be there when you go tell Dave Chappelle, you know what? You can't say that, because I want to hear his answer to what you have to say.
Right.
He can say whatever he wants to say, you know, and you know, and all of us can.
And comedy is kind of the point of the spear. If they can stop us, they can stop anyone.
Amen.
Everyone.
We're the last bastion of freedom of speech.
Yeah.
That's what Lenny Bruce was all about. That's what George Carlin, that's what those comics are all about. You know, that you may not agree with them. By the way, I look at some of Lenny Bruce's routines sometimes and I think, it didn't knock me out. You know, but he stopped the rat-a-tat-tat comic, you know, ba-dum, laugh, ba-dum, laugh. He became a storyteller, and he would open your eyes to some things that, wow, I never thought of it quite that way. And then also there would be a laugh or two in there, you know. But if you didn't agree with him, that's okay. But you didn't have the right to stop him. They put him in jail.
Right.
But America didn't allow that. You know, the people stood up. You know, and we can't either as comedians. Don't let anybody tell you what you can say and what you can't say. And as far as politics, you know, the problem with late night shows now, Johnny Carson was brilliant at, you never knew if he was a Democrat or Republican. And when Mike Wallace had him on 60 Minutes and said, how come you don't do more political material? He said, why should I divide my audience? He said, all day long, people work hard jobs. They go through problems, pressures. They come home, dinner, there's more pressures and bad news, and they got bills and stuff to pay. Then they may go do a second job and they come home and they're trying to put the kids to bed, and you got to worry about all the problems and the bills. And then finally you get in bed at night and you're going to turn Johnny on. You know, all the news is bad all around the world. You know, they don't put good news on the news.
That's right.
Because good news doesn't get ratings. So he said, now they turned me on and I'm going to now talk about politics. They've heard enough of it. I want to make them laugh. They go to sleep laughing at me, you know, laughing at my show. And that's what Johnny insisted on. When you did the show, when you sat down and talked to him, have funny stories. We don't want to hear about your hardships. Make people laugh, you know.
You know, when I was watching some of your interviews, one of the things that impressed me about you, and I think it's because you had such a wide spectrum of jobs, and how you had to deal with so many people, you have a good common sense about, and one of the stories, I hope you'll share it with us, is like how you got on. You didn't get right into the Tonight Show right away. You were playing softball, and I'll let you finish that story. But it's interesting lesson of, you know, people are people. You know, you know.
Well, I had, unfortunately, when I went out when the comedy team split up after 6 years, Tim and Tom split up, and Tim went on to become Venus Flytrap on WKRP Cincinnati, and but he struggled too for a while. But the team split up, and we wrote a book about that called Tim and Tom: An American Comedy in Black and White. And now there's talk about them wanting to make a miniseries out of that, of young black and a young white guy who endured what we did from the late 60s, 1969 to 1975. We toured the nation in all black clubs, all white clubs, and the dues we paid. There were no comedy clubs in those days, so we paid dues that no other act ever had to pay, because one was black and one was white. In those days, you didn't see a black guy and a white guy walking down the street together, let alone on a stage together. You know, and I want to get back to your original question, but the other thing that I want to say is about Tim and Tom, that no matter what happens in my life, I'll take this to my grave. And Tim Reed says the same thing. If you knew how many times that, you know, wherever there was racial tension in America, Tim and Tom went to make people laugh. we did 11 prisons in 1 year. We did colleges and high schools, anywhere there was racial tension, we went there and made people laugh. We didn't lecture them. We went to make people laugh. I can't tell you how many times a young white kid would come up to me and say, I got a black friend that I really like, and I like to reach out to him. But if I do, the white guys are going to give me a bad time. But after watching you and Tim today, I'm going to reach out to my black friend. And then a black kid would come up and say, I got a white friend and I like the guy. The brothers are going to wear me out if we. He said, but after watching you and Tim, I'm going to reach out to my white friend. That happened more than you'll ever know. And one, I'll never forget this. A guy said, I learned more about race relations watching you and Tim perform than I did in any classroom or any book I ever read. Because you can't legislate love, Jim. No government can legislate love.
Right.
They can't do that. But you can. Race relations are about race relations. Tim Reed and I were having a relationship on stage every night. We were having fun, poking fun at all the stereotypes of white people and black people. We were having fun. So they saw what race relations is really all about. They saw it through humor, So that means more to me than any award and anything else. I can't tell you through the years where I've gone, where people have come up to me and said, watching you and Tim changed my life. It really did. And that makes me feel good, more than anything, And I forgot your original question.
That's all right. I asked you about that to begin with. We probably got back to it. But this is the way conversation goes. It flows around, I think I was asking you about your first, you had a great story about how you kind of won over the producers of the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
You had a softball team with the Comedy Store and.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, in 1975, when the team split up, wherever you went in America in 1975, wherever you went, people say, what do you do for a living? You say, I'm a stand-up comedian. The next question out of their mouth was, oh yeah, have you ever been on Johnny Carson? And if you hadn't been on Johnny Carson in the eyes of America, you just weren't a comedian. You might want to be one, you might going to be one, but you weren't one now. So that what we wanted to do was get on Johnny Carson show. Comedians migrated from all over the country, coming to the West Coast. Because what happened was in 1972, Johnny Carson left New York as the host of the Tonight Show and began doing it in Burbank. And Freddie Prinze did one appearance on the Tonight Show and the next day got a sitcom. One appearance on that show, your whole life changed. 26 million people watched that show every night. So comics from all over the country migrated to the West Coast to get on at the Comedy Store. That was the only game in town in those days. The improvisation and the Laugh Factory came later, much later. But the Comedy Store on Sunset Boulevard, and comedy in the 70s was the rock and roll of the 70s. People were getting discovered every night at the Comedy Store. All these shows, Johnny Carson, Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, Dinah Shore, Midnight Special, Rock Concert, Soul Train, American Bandstand, they were all using comedians. Canada had 3 shows up there that they were sending their talent coordinators down to Sunset Boulevard to see the new comedians and flying them up there first class and paying them and doing shows. So, it was the hot spot and everybody wanted to be there. Now, the trick was to get on at the Comedy Store. Now, when you got out there, when I went out there, my wife wanted me out of the business. She hated show business with a passion. She wanted me out. When she married me, and I don't blame her, by the way, to go into this precarious business. She had a father who worked 38 years in a factory and brought a check home every Friday. The rent was paid, the groceries are paid. Here I was half the time, we couldn't, we were borrowing Peter to pay Paul, and she hated show business. So when the team split up, I talk about it in my book, but I was sitting in the bar with my buddies and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? It was like 1:30 in the morning, they were getting ready to close the bar. And my buddy tending bar came up to me. I was thinking, what am I going to do? And I said, I was always good at alternatives. I thought, well, I could get another black guy and we could do the same act. Or I could get a job in the factory like my wife wanted me to do and forget this dream of mine. Or I could go it alone. And sitting there at the bar, I thought, I'm going to go it alone. I'm going to become a stand-up comedian by myself. And I said, thinking I was always good at goals because I read a lot of books on motivation at that time. But I said, okay, you're going to be a stand-up. And my goal would be to get on the Johnny Carson show. That would be my goal, to get on the Tonight Show. And I made up my mind, that's what I'm going to do. And I remember a book I read. It said, if you search your life, and if there's something you want to do in your life, and it's a noble endeavor, search your life and see if there's anything that can deter you from that noble endeavor, and then get it out of your life, man, woman, or beast. And I thought I want to do the Tonight Show. What would stop me? And alcohol. I love drinking beer like my dad. I love drinking beer with the guys and hanging out. I said, that's the only thing I know that could stop me. You got to have a clear head if you're going to write material and be this funny person on stage every night. So I pushed the beer across the bar, and my buddy coming down at the end of the bar, he said, I was tending bar. He said, through for the night, Tommy? I said, I quit. He said, for tonight, you quit? I said, I quit, period. I quit drinking. He went, yeah, right. I'll see you here tomorrow. And I never drank again until after I was doing Tonight shows and a big success, you know. But saying all that, I get out to the West Coast. I tell my wife, I said, I'm only going to be there a couple of weeks and I'm coming back home. And she thinks I'm getting out of the business, you know. I get out there and I think I'll get on at the Comedy Store right away and I'll have something to go home and tell her, guess what? You know, well, 30 days go by and I'm still not on at the Comedy Store. I was house sitting a girl's house, a girl singer that I knew. And she had a boyfriend and they were on the road somewhere, but I was house sitting her house. And my wife sends me a Dear John to that house. She said, this is your dream, not mine. I will never move to California. So you go on and do whatever you want to do, but I'm finished with it, you know, with this whole dream of yours. Now I'm hitchhiking up and down Sunset Boulevard, begging to work for free every night at the Comedy Store, and I can't get on. Now the girl singer comes back, and her, you know, her boyfriend had another place. She didn't live with her. And so she said, Tommy, you can't stay here anymore because he's a very jealous guy. I said, Pat, I don't have any place to go. And I'm still not on at the Comedy Store. Finally, she said, I got a room way in the back, but do me a favor. If my boyfriend doesn't stay here, but if you see his car out in front, don't come in. She said, he usually stays at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, but don't come in because he's a very jealous guy. So I stayed in her back room. But one night, what I didn't realize, they had a party in the neighborhood and they had a valet parker and he had to park his car like 3 blocks down the street. So I didn't know that. I go in the back door with the key. He's sleeping on a couch. He thinks I'm a burglar. And he's petrified. He jumps up, what's going on? What's going on? And she sees me and she said, oh, he's my friend. And he says, your friend? Your friend? Now he said, how come I don't know about this? You know, now I'm trying to tell the guy, look, she's a nice person. She's trying to help me. And he's accusing me. You know, and you didn't tell me about him? How long has this been going on now? He's accusing me of having sex with this girl. And I'm trying to tell him no, and she's crying. And finally I said to him, look, she's a nice person. I got a wife and 3 kids in Chicago. She's trying to help me. I'm a comedian. I'm trying to get on at the Comedy Store. And he wouldn't have that. You know, I had to beat your ass. I had to take you outside. And I boxed when I was in the Navy. I'm not the toughest guy in the world, but I had a lot of street fights. I had my nose broke twice. I've been there.
Yeah.
I don't have a degree from academia, but I got a doctorate from the streets. So I told him, I said, I've been begging you to listen to me, that she's a nice person, just trying to help a guy out. But you won't have that because you got a sick mind. And your sickness, you believe that we had an affair. Otherwise, she couldn't be that decent. So it's you that's sick, not me. But you want to whip my ass? I'm going out in the alley. Come on out. You know, by that time I had it. I didn't care. My whole world was crashing down on me. Anyway.
Right.
I said, come on out and show me what you got. Come on out, tough guy. And I went outside. No, he ain't gone. He was selling wolf tickets, as we used to say in the neighborhood. But meanwhile, she's mad. She was, Tommy, damn you, Tommy. And she slams the door and broke a panel out of one of the doors in the window in the door. Then she got all my stuff and threw it out in the back. And there was an old Nash Rambler on blocks, and that I used to dump her garbage. And there was an old Nash Rambler on blocks out in the back where the front seat came down. I put my stuff in there and I stayed in that car for almost a month. I hitchhiked to the Comedy Store every day, you know, and hitchhiked around the city. I wash up in a gas station. That's where I was. I finally got on at the Comedy Store. I finally did an audition with Mitzi. And now I got to try to get the Tonight Show to come and see me, but I had to develop material. In the meantime, I ended up getting a gig in Canada on a TV show. I went back to Chicago, opened for Fats Domino at Mr. Kelly's. I arranged all that. I hustled all that. And then I got my wife and kids to come back with me. I convinced her to come back and be with me. Now I come back to the West Coast, and now my goal is the Tonight Show. So I'm working on new material and all that stuff. And I didn't have a manager, didn't have an agent. I couldn't get them to come and see me, you know. And I kept trying to figure out, how could I, when I'd see Craig Tennis, the head coordinator, I was always polite because I had met him when I was with Tim and Tom. Couldn't get him to come and see me. Now, we had a softball team called the Comedy Store, the softball team. We had a basketball team too, Comedy Store Bombers. I was captain of the baseball team and the basketball team because I've always been a jock, you know, love sports. Anyhow, we're playing the Tonight Show, and Craig Tennis was a real hothead, a real athletic guy, but a hot-headed guy about sports, and he was the head talent coordinator. And Gabe Kaplan's pitching for us for the Comedy Store, and I'm playing third base. I'm usually a left fielder. I've been a left fielder all my life, but I'm playing third base this day. And Paul Black, one of the Tonight Show coordinators, hits a double into the gap, and he's trying to stretch it to a triple. And what was his name now? Our center fielder. Oh, he's a great ball player too. Oh, I think it was the name of the minute. Anyhow, he gets the ball and throws me a perfect one hopper to third base. And Paul slides. He tries to stretch it into a triple, and I tagged him. He was out. He was really out. And I went, "You're out of there." And the umpire said, "He's out." And Craig Tennis starts screaming at the umpire. "He was safe. What the hell's wrong with you?" And he's screaming at the umpire. Now, the umpire was just one of the guys they picked up on the side there. In fact, he was smoking a joint before the game, so you know how sharp he was. But anyhow, so he said, "All right, he's safe." You know. Now, meanwhile, Gabe Kaplan comes off the mound and he gets face to face with Craig Tennis. But you know, Gabe's doing the Tonight Show. He's hosting the Tonight Show. And Gabe said, "You're full of a shit." And I'm not full of, yes, you are. And they're arguing back and forth. And I'm not saying anything. Gabe comes over to me and said, "Tommy, what's wrong with you? He was out by 5 feet." I said, "Hey, Gabe, you're doing the Tonight Show. I'm trying to do the Tonight Show. You think I care if he was safe or out?" Yeah. Now, anyhow, after that, Gabe's hosting the Tonight Show about 3 weeks later. And he asked me to come and be in the audience. I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm a new comedian." And I see Craig Tennis down below, and I see Paul Block, the two guys, the coordinators. So I get a pencil and paper, and I write a note. And I asked the usher, "Could you please give this to Craig Tennis down there?" And I'm sitting in the audience before the show. So he runs down and he gives Craig Tennis, it's a guy up there once. And I put, "Dear Mr. Tennis, my name is Pop Williams. I'm 88 years old. I'm blind in one eye and can hardly see out of the other eye." He said, "I was 100 yards away the other day watching your ball game, and Paul Black was out by 40 feet. He said, as bad as my eyesight, I still saw that he was out. I just want to let you know that." And I signed it, "Love, Pop Williams." Now they both start laughing, and they're looking in the crowd, and they see me, and I wave at them, and they laugh, and that connected me with them, And when I saw them after the show, "Oh, that was funny, Thomas." And now I said, "Hey, you guys, you got to come and see me. I'm going to do that. We're going to do that." Yep. And sure enough, I auditioned one night with a new kid named Billy Crystal. And,
whatever happened to him?
I'm on Jim McHugh's show. Where's Billy Crystal?
Yeah, what's he doing? He's wasting his time today. That's just such a great story, such horse sense, like street smarts, like I'm going to, win the battle, but lose the war. You could have been the guy that argues over that out. And you'd still be sleeping in that car in the backyard.
Yeah. Again, I always say I don't have a degree from academia, but I got a doctorate from the streets. I grew up on the streets. I was a kid shining shoes in bars.
Right.
And when I said pins and bowling alleys, there was a pool room down below. So when you weren't setting pins, you had to be by a table. There was 22 pool tables. All the pin boys had to be by the back table. Now, even if you could play free all day long, but even if you weren't playing pool, you had to be there, because if the guy who ran the bowling alley had to search for you, you were fired.
Yeah.
So when I need a pin boy, I'm not looking out in the street and going, "You rather be there or not." So I grew up in that pool room too. And I ended up racking balls in that pool room. And I grew up with thieves and con men and hustlers and street fighters. And I mean, it was a real education,
Yeah. Knowing when to be quiet and when to be funny.
Yeah. As that old song about that Kenny Rogers, who was a good friend. I love Kenny. I used to do a lot of shows with him, but know when to hold them and know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
there should be a college called Common Sense University.
Yeah, I'd go to that college. I'd take some courses, because I think back, sometimes some of the pig-headed things I've done,
Yeah.
You're like, what was I thinking?
Yeah. Well,
Like pull out the lens just a little bit, But I want to ask, because you've worked with so many great acts. I love Smokey Robinson, and you were talking about Tony Orlando before, and just so many. How did all that? I mean, did you get an agent that then started putting you out with music acts, or how did all that kind of come about?
So what happened when I first started doing the Tonight Show? Again, 26 million people watch that show.
Right.
To describe that night, it's hard to describe what it was like when I finally got the Tonight Show, they booked me on it. I went there, got put in makeup. They put me up in my dressing room, took me down to the green room, and they ran out of time. They came up to me and said, "We're out of time, Tom. You come back next week." I came back next week. I got in makeup, took me up to my dressing room, bring me down to the green room, getting ready to go on. They said, "We ran out of time again." 3 weeks in a row. On the
Wow.
fourth time, I'm in makeup. Fred DeCordova comes in the makeup room, the producer of the Tonight Show. He said to me, "I got bad news for you." I said, "What?" He said, "You're going on tonight.
Oh no.
Now, you get a lump in your throat about the size of a grapefruit because
That's right.
26 million people watch that show. Now you're in the green room. They come and get you. Bert Convy was singing a song. Carol Burnett was on the show that night. They said, "You're on after the song." You take that long walk from the green room all the way back behind this curtain. Now, after I became a veteran of the Tonight Show, all the stage hands would say, "Hey, Dreesen, how's your Cubs? Hey, Tommy," they'd talk. But your first time, they see you coming, all the stage hands turn their back and they whisper, "It's his first time. It's his first time."
Oh, no.
Pressures. Now you get behind that curtain and it's all dark back there because they're on commercial break and Doc Severinsen's playing music in commercial break. And the coordinator, Craig Tennis, said, "You okay?" And I said, "I'm fine." It's okay. Now he walks away and you're talking to God one-on-one now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Man, what's my first line? What's the first line? Oh yeah, okay, okay. Now. Meanwhile, all of a sudden the music stops and your heart stops because they're live now.
Yeah.
And all the curtain lights up because the lights are coming on live, and then you heard Johnny Carson say, "We're back now," and I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight because my next guest is making his first appearance on the Tonight Show. Will you welcome Tom Dreesen? Now, that one line, "I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight." He set the tone. They open that curtain, you walk out there, you can't see the audience. They're bright lights. It's like you're in an operating room, and you hit your mark on the floor, and you can see the on camera with the red light. Now, and they're still applauding, and you get the first joke out, and it got a laugh. And you get the second joke out, and it got a laugh. Now the third joke, I got applause. Now Johnny Carson, I hear Johnny and Ed McMahon laughing behind me. Now I'm on a roll. I end up getting 8 applause. Then when I finished, I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, you've been a marvelous audience. This is my first appearance on the Tonight Show. And show business is a tough life. So if you like me, just if you like me and you're Protestant, say a prayer. If you're Catholic, light a candle. If you're Jewish, somebody in your family owns a nightclub. Tell them about me, will you please?" And I go through the curtain, and the coordinator come running around there, and he said, "Go back. Johnny wants you to go back and take another bow." So I go back for the second bow, and he gives that little circle that he used to give like that.
Yeah.
And I never stopped working from that time. 61 appearances. I did 61 appearances on
Wow.
the Tonight Show. But I never stopped working from that night. That was 50 years ago. No, I'm sorry. That was 45 years ago.
How many appearances do you have to do before you don't have a lump in your throat standing outside that curtain?
I was always a little apprehensive because this is a big show. Now, doing Merv Griffin's show and doing Dinah Shore's show. After that show, I was doing all those shows. Merv Griffin, Dinah Shore, Mike Douglas. I was doing Midnight Special, Rock Concert. And the Tonight Show was the stamp of approval. So when you felt you could do that, you felt like really you had arrived and you were comfortable in your own skin on stage. But it always was a pressure show because Joan Rivers told me one time, she said to Fred DeCordova, "I've done 40 Tonight Shows. If I bombed on the next one, would I be back on?" And Fred DeCordova thought about it. He went, "Maybe one more time." That's
Wow.
how they felt they were the Cadillac of late night shows. So anyhow, once I started doing those shows, then all the other shows are asking for me. In those days, you had to work clean. By the way, not only did 26 million people watch that show, but my mother had everybody in Harvey, Illinois watching the show. So if I bombed, I couldn't even go back home.
You can't go home ever again.
But
Change your name.
yeah, exactly. But you know what? Doing all those other shows, you had to work clean. That was, we're in show business in those days. That's 2 words, show and business. Now you say, well, if I get on the Tonight Show, I can get known. Well, how do I get on the Tonight Show? You watch the other comedians. You had to write material that grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and the kids would laugh at. You couldn't say "go to hell." You couldn't say those words. You had to work clean. Television was this big in those days. ABC, NBC, CBS. Today, once cable came along, and then you could work as blue as you want. And I'm not a prude, by the way. I'm not a prude. I can do a stag roast with the best of them, but it wasn't a good business venture in those days. So once I start working clean in front of all these shows, all of a sudden, all these artists, Sammy Davis Jr. took me on the road for 3 years. but Tony Orlando and Don wanted to use me. Mac Davis, Smokey Robinson, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Natalie Cole, Frankie Avalon, James Darren. All these these singers had family audiences coming to see them. They wanted a comedian in front of them that you didn't have people walking out asking for their money back. You know,
Right.
so I was in demand. You know, and corporations, corporate America. You know, if you're a headliner and people come to your club to see you perform, you know, they came to see you. It's your audience. You're the headliner. Well, you can do whatever you want. But if you work corporate America, they can dictate policy. They'll say,
Right.
look, my clients are, you know, we have several a heavy Jewish audience that are very Orthodox, or we have you know, a lot of our clients are born again Christians. They can dictate policy and they'll pay you good money. But so that was the mantra in those days. You had to work clean, you know, and that's how I started working with all those other artists, because, you know, they wanted someone in front of them that didn't, you know, that the audience wasn't mad when the singer came out, you know.
If I drop some names that you just dropped, can you give me a little story or a little taste of what it was like working with some of these different people?
Sure.
Well, let's start with Sammy Davis Jr. Because I grew up in West Hartford, Connecticut, and he used to have a golf tournament there.
I played in it.
Okay,
I
okay.
played it, and I performed at the Civic Center there in Hartford with Sammy. You know,
I'll tell you my story with Sam if you don't mind. I was selling hot dogs on the street in Hartford, and he came walking by. I'm 6'6", and he's not.
you could fit in your watch pocket. You know,
But I was starstruck, you know. But I was like, also like, wow, I thought he was, you know, because if you're not, and at that time I was nowhere near show business. I'm still not. But you know, it's like I thought people were, you know, like everyone in show business was bigger.
yeah.
But talk about a guy that can do everything. Like, you know, I
He
mean,
was
amazing.
the biggest talent you've ever seen in show business. Sammy Davis. I mean, I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood, so I played basketball on an all-black basketball team. I played football on an all-black football team. And so when I first went on his show, Sammy and Company, I did routines about that, about what it was like growing up as the only white kid in an all-black neighborhood and doing all these routines. He fell on the floor. He just thought it was, you know, hysterical. And he told me, I'm going to take you on the road with me. And he had a show called Sammy and Company, a TV show out of Harrah's in Lake Tahoe. And he took me on the road for years. But sitting in the wings night after night watching him was going to school, going to show business 101. There was nothing he couldn't do on a stage. He could sing as good as any singer out there. He could play, he could do comedy as good as any comedian I knew. He could do impressions better than almost any impression I've ever met in my life. He's a great impressionist. He could play the piano. He could play he could dance better than anybody out there.
That's right. That's right.
Play the piano, play the drums. He could play the trumpet. He could do it all. And watching him every night was show business 101. He taught me so much about show business, stage presence, and he was just a wonderful. The first night at Caesar's Palace when I'm working with him, in those days, one of the worst rooms you could ever work in show business in those days was Caesar's Palace, because it had a high ceiling. And comics, as you know, we like a low ceiling. Laughter is sound. It hits the ceiling and comes at you.
Right.
I loved working the Sands Hotel, the Desert Inn. I love working the Riviera, the Golden Nugget. They had intimate rooms with intimate audiences. You know, Caesar's was a big, large room, large seating, and they serve food. Can you know what it's like for a comedian to walk out in front of a huge audience and they're all eating?
Yeah.
You know what they do? I'll show you what they do. Give me a pen. When audiences are eating, they don't laugh at you. They point the fork at you. They go, mmm. How do you set your timing off of You know, anyhow, so Sammy knew that. This is my first time in Vegas. And first of all, most big stars put their name on the marquee so big there wasn't room to park your car in the parking lot, let alone let an opening act have a line. Sammy made sure they put my name up on that marquee.
Wow.
Huge with him. My first time in Vegas, he said, Tommy, if I put your name on the marquee, whoever you work for after this, I set a precedent, giving you a marquee. Then he went in, the conductor, Nat Brandywine, said, Sammy, they said, Tom, you'll do 20 minutes. Sammy's going to do an hour and 10. He said, we do 90-minute shows here. And Sammy said, no, Nat. He said, this is Tommy's first time here. All the critics are going to be in the audience. If Tommy scores, they're going to invite him back. He said, so he needs a score. So I'm going to come out. He said, I'll do 3 or 4 songs. Then I'll bring Tommy out. He said, Tommy, you do, you know, whatever, 25, 30, whenever you feel got him, I'll come out and I'll make up the rest of the time. Now, the waiters and waitresses, their job is when that headliner walks out, they better have that food out of there. That's that was the rule
Right.
there. Well, Sammy would walk out first, and he's going to start singing songs. Waiters and waitresses were taking food away from people who haven't even started eating yet.
Right,
it's
right.
showtime. Yeah. So he would get the audience till they're in the palm of his hand. All the food, all the waiters are out. Then he'd say, "Ladies and gentlemen, you've been good to me all these years." I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, "You've been good to me all these years." He said, "In my good times and my bad times." He
Right.
said, "And I think of my audience as family."
Yeah.
He said, "And when your family does something good for you, you want to do something good for them, like maybe bring them a gift. I got a gift for you. I saw this young kid on my show, and you're going to love him. It's his first time here in Las Vegas." That's how he brought me out every
So
night.
generous.
Oh, I mean, he never forgot that he was an opening act. For him to do that for me, and I'd walk out every night and I'd say, "I always dreamed that one day I would work Las Vegas, and I dreamed there would be Caesar's Palace, but I never dreamed that my opening act would be Sammy Davis Jr." He would laugh in the wings, and they would laugh, But I mean, God bless him. I miss him every day of my life. He was just a wonderful, a wonderful, wonderful guy, Sammy Davis. I'm sorry, that was a long answer.
And he
to
took
it.
the hill for a lot of people and changed the way show business was done,
By the way, that nothing pisses me off more than that. When I see young black comedians or young black actors making fun of Sammy Davis Jr., he was the Jackie Robinson of show business.
That's right.
He was the Jackie Robinson of show business. The dues he paid, the things he went through. It's not fair. He was a brilliant, wonderful, wonderful performer, and he had a heart as big as Wrigley Field.
Mm. Fenway Park for me. Fenway Park.
Fenway Park. I'm sorry. Really.
What about Smokey Robinson? I'd love to hear.
One of my dearest friends, every year I would run 26 miles in Chicago for multiple sclerosis because my sister Darlene had MS. So we called it 26 miles for Darlene. And I would bring in celebrities every year to run part of the way with me, a mile, a block, 2 blocks, whatever you wanted to run. And I'd bring in 20 celebrities. American Airlines was my sponsor. So Frankie Avalon and Tony Danza and Eddie Marinero and Frankie Valli and Jamie Farr and Connie Stevens and Chicago Cubs and Rick Sutcliffe and Mark Grayson and the Bears, Jim McMahon and all these people. And I'm leaving out a lot of names of these stars. Sure. But Smokey Robinson, all those who would run part of the way. Smokey's the only one who ran all 26 miles with me.
Wow.
That's how good a friend he is. My mother used to say, a good friend is someone, if you ask them to go a mile for you and they go 2 miles. I always say, what kind of friend do you have if you ask them to go a mile and they go 26 miles?
Wow.
But him and I, he was on Entertainment Tonight one night, and the woman said, "How long have you known Tom Dreesen?" He said, "My whole life." She said, "Really?" He said, "My whole life." She said, "You're from Detroit and he's from Chicago." He said, "I know." He said, "But there's certain people you meet that moments later, you feel like you've known them your whole life." And he said, "That's how Tommy and I, so touring with him, I mean, we had such great laughs and such great times. And touring with him led me to Frank Sinatra, as a matter of fact, on a happenstance thing. Yeah, Smokey's, Bob Dylan called him the greatest poet of the 20th century. Yeah. He's written maybe 5,000 songs. As you and I are talking right now, Smokey's getting a check.
That's right.
He's written so many beautiful songs, and he's the finest Christian man I ever met in my life. If you believe in that, that you love everybody. Smokey Robinson loves everybody. He really does. He loves every human being, and he loves to sing for you. He loves to sing for you. And like me, he loves golf. So,
so you have known each other your whole life.
Well, I feel like he calls me baby brother every time. I call him Rabbit. He always reminds me of a furry little rabbit. And I don't know. I nicknamed him Rabbit. And he calls me baby brother. Baby brother, what are you doing now? I love Smokey. I truly do.
All right. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you a little bit about Frank Sinatra, because I know everybody asks you about him, but I mean, there's only one. I mean,
Smokey, I'm touring with Smokey, and we're working at Caesars in Lake Tahoe, and Frank Sinatra was appearing at Harrah's next door, and I had worked Harrah's many times with Sammy Davis, with Mac Davis, so I'm working with Smokey now, and there were 7 nights that we were there at Caesars, and I don't know what made me pick that night. I could have went any night to see Frank. I called the people at Harrah's, and they'd let me in, even the place was sold out. put me in the back where I could see. And for some reason, I chose this one night. And the maitre d' said, come on over, Tommy, we'll take care of you. And I had seen Sinatra perform, and as a little boy, I heard him on the jukeboxes, became a fan. But this particular night, I'm rushing over there after my show. I didn't even change out of my stage clothes. I ran off stage and I ran over to Harrah's. There's a casino, and then there's Harrah's. So I ran past the first casino, and I'm running in the showroom at Harrah's, and out because I didn't want to miss Frank's opening. Frank Sinatra created more excitement walking to the microphone than most people did with their whole act. Just watching this guy walk out in front of an audience, I can't tell you, you chills. The audience would just roar and cheer, and and especially when I worked 40,000 seaters with him in Hawaii and 20,000 seat arenas. I mean, it was just a sight to behold. So I'm rushing in the showroom because I want to catch that opening. And out in front of the showroom is the vice president of Harrah's Hotel, a man named Holmes Hendrickson, very powerful guy in our business, as well as he was talking to this big heavyset guy with a cigar. And I was rushing in the showroom, and he said, Tommy, come here. And I reluctantly went over because I didn't want to miss the opening. And he said, Tommy, this is Mickey Rudin. Well, I recognized the name. That was Frank Sinatra's lawyer and very powerful guy in our business. He said, Mickey, this is Tom Dreesen. And I think Tom would make a great opening act for Frank Sinatra. And the lawyer got a pained expression on his face like he had heard that a million times. And he winked at the vice president, but I caught the wink. He said, hey, kid, if I gave you a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000? I said, Mr. Rudin, put it this way. If you gave me a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000? He said, oh, I like this kid.
Right answer.
So anyhow, a week later, they called me and said, would you like to work with Frank Sinatra 1 week at the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City? And I said, yeah, sure. And I thought, I'll try to get my picture taken with him. I'll hang at every bar back in Chicago.
Sure.
And that's it. The second night with him, he and his wife, Barbara, took me out to dinner. And I can remember like it was yesterday, we were having dinner and he was sitting across from me. He set his knife and his fork down. He said, I like your material and I like your style. I'd like you to do a few other dates with me if you're interested. And I didn't say, let me, check my calendar. I said, oh yeah, sure. Sure. And it turned into 14 years, 45, 50 cities a year. A friendship I can't describe. I stayed in his home 6 times a year. We'd ride around till dawn, until the sun came up. When I first started working with him, he was the boss of this tour. And I treated him that way. As time went by, we became kind of like buddies, hanging out together. And at the end of his life, he was more like a father to me. And I miss him every day. I really do. It's hard to describe that rarefied air that he brought me into.
Right.
To go down to his home. He had a huge compound in Rancho Mirage, and the outer perimeter of bungalows. He had a big swimming pool, tennis courts, a main house, but the outer perimeter of bungalows, named Strangers in the Night, Tender Trap, My Way, named after his songs. Right? And his house guests, when I beat on me, Gregory Peck and his wife Ernie, Kirk Douglas and his wife Ann, Jack Lemmon and his wife Felicia, Robert Wagner, Joe St. John, Angie Dickinson, Admiral Shepard, Isaac Stern. All these movie stars. These were people I saw in the movies when I was a kid.
That's
growing
right.
up. Harvey, as a poor kid, and they're all treating me like an equal. I mean, this rarefied air that he brought me into. I'll never ever forget that. And plus, he was like treating me like a son sometimes. We had such great conversations, and he taught me so many things. All of this is in my book, by the way. Still Standing: My Journey from Streets and Saloons to the Stage and Sinatra. That's just out now, and it's doing great. But all those stories are not stories you've never heard about him. Intimate stories,
Where can they get that book? It's Amazon and
Amazon and let me see. I want to put that, but on Amazon or at Barnes and Noble. And I'm gonna click this choose a little virtual background, and go to here, and we'll put that up there. How's that?
That's great.
Okay, you can see that. Oh, there, yeah, you can get it on Amazon. That's the cover of the book. But again, there was nobody like Frank Sinatra in so many ways. He was the most generous human being I ever met in my life. He did things that you'll never know about because he didn't want people to know about. But I'll tell you a quick story. One night we were coming out of the Waldorf Astoria in New York. We're going to a gig, and the limo was out the back because Frank had to go out the back. If he went out the front, he'd get mobbed. And so he came out of this back apartment back there at the Waldorf Astoria, and the security was rushing us to the limo. And a woman jumped out of the doorway. The doorman told me she'd been hiding there for 5 hours. And So as we were getting to the limo, she was screaming, "Mr. Sinatra, please, Mr. Sinatra, please, Mr. Sinatra, please." He was getting in limo and she kept screaming. Security was holding her back. Frank got out of the limo and went back up to her. I got out and he walked up. He said, "What is it?" She said, "My husband is home ill. He's very, very, very ill. If you would sign an autograph, it would mean the world to him." He said, "Sure." And he's signing the autograph. And she said, "Oh, what beautiful cufflinks." And they were a couple $1,000 cufflinks, had studs in them. And I know where he got it at. She said, "What beautiful cufflinks." She said, "Thank you." He took the cufflinks off and he handed them to her and said, "Give these to your husband." She said, "Oh, no, 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 no. I don't want them. I was just admiring them." He said, "No, I want your husband to have them." And we get in the limo and I said, "Frank, that was beautiful. But why did you do that?" He said, "Tommy, if you possess something that you can't give away, then you don't possess it. It possesses you."
Wow.
And I never forgot that. It really was something that I used throughout my whole life. But he was so right. He said later on, he said, "Tommy, Aristotle Onassis had billions of dollars. He had yachts. He had private jets. He had mansions. And the second he died, it transferred. None of it was his anymore.
Right.
No possession is yours. You're only using it. You see that shirt you have on, Jimmy? If you die tomorrow, somebody else is going to wear that shirt someday. You see,
a tall somebody.
You better be a big guy, but
you better be a big guy.
But my point is that lesson that he taught me, that he's right. And by the way, he not only talked that talk, he walked that talk.
Yeah.
Money meant nothing to him. If I told you the times that we were out to dinner somewhere and there might be 14 people, whatever, Frank would, hand me a wad of $100 bills this thick. He'd say, "Tommy, go take care of everybody." I'd go in the kitchen, the chefs, the wine steward. I'd duke everybody, tip everybody. I'd come back in the limo again and I handed back what was left. He'd say, "Did you get everybody?" I said, and he put it in his pocket. It was so beneath him that look at the money.
Yeah.
I could have said to him, and I took 1,000 out for myself because I want to play golf tomorrow with H. Go ahead. He meant that.
Right.
He was a unique and interesting individual, complex. Was he a saint? No, but he did some saintly things in his life. Arguably the greatest career show business has ever known. Forget about the fact he's the greatest pop singer of all time. Forget about the fact that he went to the studio 1,431 times. Forget about the fact that he did over 100 albums. Forget about the fact that he was on Billboard from the 40s till the end of his life. Forget about all those things. What about his acting? What about From Here to Eternity, where he won the Academy Award? What about The Man with the Golden Arm? What about The Manchurian Candidate?
Oh, I love that movie.
A brilliant actor. When you gave Frank Sinatra a song, to him it was a script. What did the writer feel the night the writer took pen in hand? Frank would immerse himself in that lyric and become that lonely guy in the bar whose woman left him and he's never going to find love again. And you felt that. You felt that. And he would sing a song of joy, "Come fly with me," and you felt that too. He was a brilliant actor. In one night sitting around at his compound with Gregory Peck and all these people I told you about, Kirk Douglas and Clint Eastwood and Robert Wagner, and they were talking acting. And I noticed they were showing such great reverence to this guy, Sinatra. And I was curious because in Hollywood, who did you study with? Everybody always has some great name of somebody to study with. And I was curious. I said, "Frank, did you ever study acting?" And Gregory Peck grabbed my arm and held it real tight. He said, "Acting lessons would have ruined him. He was a diamond in the rough you didn't fool with. No. You didn't fool with that instrument." He's interesting, wonderful, complex.
People like that are geniuses. I mean, like Sammy Davis and Frank Sinatra, it's like there's beats in comedy, but it's like there's different languages. They could read the beats in acting, they could read the beats in music, they could read the beats in comedy, and I feel like maybe that's it. I don't know. I mean, it's just a theory, but they were able
when
to.
You watch those guys, it was the round peg fitting in a round hole. That's where they belong.
Right.
That's where they belong, right? And they were born to do exactly that. Less than 1% of the population of the world make a living at what they love to do. Rarely do people find what it really was. There's a coal miner somewhere that might be the greatest artist that the planet has ever known, or pianist, or whatever. It might have been a great actor. It might have been a rocket scientist. But he never had that. It never happened in this lifetime. The Irish had a thing saying that the second you come out of the womb, God whispers in your ear what it is he wants you to do. And the rest of your life, you search for that whisper. And when you find it, the wind gets at your back. And that's what happened to me on stage. That first time I made people laugh, and I got that laugh. That was the whisper. I knew that's what I wanted to do. That's what I was put here to do. That doesn't matter. You know, sometimes people say to me, I tell my motivation classes, I say, I stand here and tell you I'm a success. I'm a success because I make a living at what I love to do. But my critics would argue, you're a success. You started out with David Letterman and Jay Leno, you know, and Jay's got 2 million cars and billions of dollars, and David owns islands, and you say you're a success. I say yes, because I was never in competition with David Letterman or Jay Leno. There's a great proverb that many people say was a Hindu proverb, but Ernest Hemingway said it. He said, never compare yourself. You know, success is living the life you want. It was what Christopher Morley, but that's what success is. But there's a great Hindu proverb that says, never compare yourself to another human being. You know, true nobility lies in being superior to your former self. You know, and that's all I was ever in competition with my whole life, is my former self. Am I a better friend than I was last year? Am I a better father than I was last year? Am I a better son than I was last year? A better neighbor? Am I a better comedian than I was last year? That's the only competition in show business. Your former self. Compete. Listen to your tapes. Look at, have I grown in the last year? You know.
That's a great lesson. Yeah. Well, I could talk to you all night, but I bet you have other things to do.
Well, no, really not.
Don't test me. Don't test me.
Jimmy, that's what we do, don't we? We comedians, we get together, and what is the most fun we ever have is hanging out afterward.
Right, at the diner.
Yeah, we're hangout guys. We're hangout guys and girls. We really are. And Chicago people, I'm from Chicago. We love to hang out. By the way, my friends in Boston, Michael Rugioni, you know, I don't know if you know Mike, the guy who scored the winning goal against the Russians in the 1980s. When I go to Boston, what do you know what we do? We hang out.
That's
you
right.
know, we get together and we like to tell stories, and comedians love to sit around. Comedians will never want to hear about your standing ovation. They don't want to hear you killed them at Madison Square Garden. They want to hear the night you bombed. Tell us the night you bombed, Jimmy. No one laughed. No, hey, listen, come on, you guys, tell them again. Nobody. Jimmy was up. No one laughed at him. We like to hear those horror stories.
Have you ever given a line to another comedian and they go up and it bombs and you fall out of your chair laughing because you know that he has that look, that pause? He thought it was a great line. You gave it to him and you feel like, oh man, what have I done?
Jay Leno used to have a funny line, like if he was on stage, and Jay, I rarely ever saw Jay bomb. Jay didn't bomb. Right. Jay was he's one of the strongest stand-up comedians you're ever going to meet. Jay could do 2 hours and just and have you go on that 2 hours, you know. Right. But Jay was trying out new material, and in the back, all the comedians, you know, were all watching. If something didn't get a laugh, and you'd hear in the back room, you know, the comedian, Jay would say, let me explain that to you. That's a new joke I was trying out. And those laughs in the back, they weren't laughs of joy. They were comedians. He said, right. They're laughing because they know the joke bomb. He said, I guess the best analogy is, he said, you know, if you're ever in the forest and like a little rabbit gets caught in a bear claw and he's stuck there and all the other animals come and they eat him. That's what those guys are doing back there. You know, he described it that way.
So true. Tell us one more time where everybody can get your book, and then I'm gonna let you go.
Okay, oh, you can see this. No, you can't see.
Still standing.
Still standing. Yeah, my journey from streets and saloons to the stage in Sinatra. And you can get it on Amazon.com and Barnes and Noble. But it's basically, if I can summarize it shortly, it's a little boy. If I close my eyes, there's this little boy carrying a shoeshine box, trudging through the snow, and he's going from bar to bar, shining shoes to make money to help feed his brothers and sisters. And every bar he goes into, Frank Sinatra's on the jukebox. And that little boy, flash forward, the end of the book, he's carrying Frank Sinatra's coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills, California. So I take you on that journey, you know, of that little boy hearing Sinatra when he's 8 years old, shining shoes, to one day carrying his coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills, California, and all the things that happen in between. You know?
Wow.
And that's what the book is about.
Well, I'm going to buy a copy of it and forge your signature.
Oh, no, I'll come to Boston. I'll fly there.
We love that.
Stick it, Jimmy. You know,
I'm going to be the guy out front selling hot dogs when you show up.
By the way, if this COVID ever ends, incidentally, you like this shirt? See what it says?
Nice.
Activated, validated, elated. I came up with this idea and trademarked it. And now my girlfriend has a print place. He makes these, so I'm gonna start plugging these because
Okay.
it gives. I wear it to stores and people give me thumbs up because they're all, it gives them a sense of relief. If imagine going to ballparks, going to Fenway Park, and everybody's wearing a shirt like that, you get at ease. It just brings it. Oh, you're all vaccinated. Okay, fine. Maybe So anyhow, that's what I'm going to be doing. And so you can get it on Amazon and you can get it on at Barnes and Noble stores. And I hope you
Awesome.
enjoy it.
Thank you so much for giving me some of your time, and what a great conversation and what great stories. I could do the show all year round with you, I bet, and never run out of stories.
I know, I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but years ago, a guy in Canada wanted to interview me and he called my manager, and I'm embarrassed to tell you, and he said, I got to interview your client, Tom Dreesen. Can you give me some things to say to him that can open up conversation? And my manager said, ask him how his day went and then get the hell out of his way. And that embarrassed me, and George Miller, you remember the comedian George Miller, wonderful comedian, passed away. He and I and Dave Letterman were best of buddies, still are, but I mean, George is gone. But they were roasting me one time at the Comedy Store, and Dave Letterman was new. They were all new, but I was ahead of. I'd already gotten Tonight shows, so Dave was the master of ceremonies, and each comedian got up and roasted me. George Miller got up. He said, "The LA police stopped Tom Dreesen." They said, "All right, you want to talk here or down at the station?" And Dreesen said, "Both and in the car." So anyhow, Jimmy, thank you, buddy. I enjoyed it. And
Thank you so very much. Everybody go out and get this book. I mean, I didn't even get a fraction of the great stories that you'll probably get to read in this book. And can you imagine, all of us have heard Frank Sinatra on the jukebox. Every single probably person. If I got one 1,000th of his audience and your audience on this podcast, I'm going to be pretty successful. But then to live this whole life and have this 14-year adventure where you end up having such a close personal relationship with him, and to be one of his pallbearers, I mean, that's amazing.
and I spoke at his funeral, and I made him laugh at his funeral because I knew that's what he'd want me to do.
Right.
Before I went up there, when my turn was go up there, I could hear Frank in my brain. He used to say to me every night when I was going on stage, I go by his dressing room. He said, "Tommy, you going on tonight?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Be funny and be brief." Be funny and be brief. And so I knew he'd want me to, and I told a funny story, and the church erupted in laughter because they needed it at that time. It was a real heavy moment, and I told a story of something that he did. And yeah, it's been a great journey, to be sure. And the reason why I call the book Still Standing, because I've been a stand-up comedian for 51 years, but I've been knocked down in my life a lot, and you'll read that in the book. I've been knocked to my knees. I've been physically knocked down, and you talk about that in the book, but I kept getting back up again. And it'll tell you why I kept getting back up, how I kept getting back up, and why, and I'm still here today, still standing. And at the end of the book, you'll see some real serious stuff happened to me, but I'm still standing, and that's what I hope people get out of it, that they walk away and say, hey, if he can endure all those things and survive, I can too.
Yeah, it's a good time for that book because a lot of people are out there and they need to know that you can go through a tough time, and there can be light at the end of the tunnel, and you can have a tough time, and you can sometimes laugh, or
Yeah, not sometimes. Again, I don't want to get into this, but we're going to be here another hour. But part of my motivation speech is about laughter. Laughter is healing. I tell young comedians, do you know how important you are to our society? Do you have any idea how important you are? Because the service you give to your audiences, laughter is healing. It used to be a theory. It's not a theory anymore.
right.
We always know that laughter is psychologically a deterrent because the brain can't think of two thoughts at the same time. So if you're laughing at a comedian, you're not thinking of your problems or a comedy album. So we know it's psychologically a deterrent. But now, because of Norman Cousins, the editor of Saturday Review, who wrote a book called The Anatomy of an Illness, he wrote another book called Laughter Man. He was diagnosed with a terminal illness. They was told he was going to die, a heart condition, through years of stress, negative input. He laid in the hospital and he thought if negative input made me ill, positive input might make me well. He checked out of the hospital. He'd only watch I Love Lucy reruns, Candid Camera, Three Stooges, Marx Brothers. He wouldn't watch the evening news. He literally laughed himself. He lived 27 years after the doctors told him he was going to die. So now, because of him, UCLA did research. What happens to the human body when it laughs? So they did research and they found out when the human body laughs, after you've had a hearty laugh, oh, and the sense of, tears run down your eyes, and the sense of well-being comes over you because your body's gone through an actual chemical change. Endorphins are released from the brain into the bloodstream when you have a hearty laugh. So laughter is not only psychologically a deterrent, it's physiologically therapeutic. So therefore, comedians are physicians of the soul. So you can call yourself Dr. McHugh, Dr. Dreesen. I'm being facetious there, but that's how important you are. That you
I was just thinking the next time I have a bad suit, a bad set, I'm gonna have a lawyer suing me for malpractice.
That's a great, see how great the comedy mind works.
Right.
While I was talking, you were thinking of a great punchline to this. That's good. I think that same way. By the way, I love that line. Yeah. But my point is, that's how important comedians are, especially at this time, this COVID time, that we can bring laughter to and again, it's
people are so isolated. They're in their little cubicles and.
Yeah. I don't want to get political, but I really believe the lockdown might be the worst thing that ever happened to this nation, to the world. People have survived plagues, they've survived a lot of things. I had the COVID. I ended up in the hospital.
My wife did too.
Yeah, 5 days I was in the hospital.
Right.
And through those motivation talks that I give, I was laying in the hospital and I said, you better practice what you preach or you're a phony. And I began to mentally practice these exercises that I teach classes. Anyhow, my point is, I really believe that we could have isolated maybe the senior part of our society, people my age, but the young people go to work because 99.9% are going to survive. More people were dying of the flu, than. So anyhow, 10 years from now, we'll know all the answers. Right now, we don't.
Right.
We don't know. I had both shots. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get out there. I haven't been on stage in over a year. I'm ready to get back on stage and make people laugh.
We started doing comedy up there we had a little room in New Hampshire, and we're doing shows. We can only let 40 people in, but I don't care. I'm not getting paid. I don't care.
Yeah.
And they don't care. They're just so happy. And it's like, it's so funny that first time I got on stage, you look at your set list, and I was looking at my set list, it says going bald. I go, well, I know I'm going bald, but what did I say about that? I have no idea, or 48%, 48% of who? What was I talking about? Well, I used to work the cruise ships. I had like 5 different sets. I had all this material. Now I'm trying to get one together and just like, not, you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. I think about that all the time.
But, and actually something's come out of it that surprised me is a lot of new material, because you're forced out there. You better come up with, and you gotta talk about what's in the room, what we're all dealing with. You gotta, you're out of your comfort zone already, and there's suffering, a little bit of suffering there. So that's a good chemistry for comedy,
Great line is, necessity is the mother of invention.
Right. That's right.
I tell young comedians sometimes, risk out there. Some night, if you say, I got this great setup and I don't know what the punchline, some night just throw it out and you may blurt out, because necessity is the mother of invention. Right. I used to tell the Tonight shows, you had to have a new 6 minutes every time you did the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
And they were now comfortable when I've done 10 or 12. And I could call and say, I'm ready March 18th. They'd say, okay, whatever date it was. They'd say, okay, Tommy. And I didn't have the first joke. That was 3 weeks from now. Now necessity is the mother of invention. Man, I'm writing. I'm going to the Comedy Store, the improvisation, the Laugh Factory. Because I got to have this shot ready.
Fear. You're going to be standing in front of that curtain in 10 days. You better have it.
But so then your creative juices start flowing. Sometimes I had to do that. I had to, prompt myself. I had to be the guy to get me going, anyhow. Okay, I'm going to run from you, pal.
Thank you so much once again. Awesome.
Okay, my pleasure, Jimmy. It was great to meet you. And I know we'll be going down the line.
I hope so.
When you read the book, I really appreciate you being a comedian. Tell me what you think. I really appreciate it.
I absolutely will. I know I'm going to love it already, but I'll tell you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, buddy. Take care.